people were saying that there was files that were disappearing, like they were looking at them, and as they were looking at them, they were gone.
3.8 million.
Wow.
So that's huge. So, let's talk too about just disclosure is underway, but it's a captive narrative, and the captive narrative is they're never going to tell the truth. They being the same people that have lied all their lives. So, about this, it's the biggest uh, facade. And there's been so much, alien referencing, and people have seen it. They can't deny it. So, one of the projects I'm working on right now is there was a story, a main story today on the Daily Mail, where they're talking about a super civilization that existed 36,000 years ago. Okay. And one guy says 12,000, the other guy says 36,000. Well, one of the most important things for people to remember is legends are different than myths, okay? Legends are the oral tradition that's passed on, usually from generation to generation, but there's always architectural or skeletal remains when it comes to the giants.
The world keeps lying, but he won't retreat on his quest for truth. Yeah. Truth, quest for truth. They can't stop me, they can't block me. Moving through, got that fire, they can't block me. Quest for truth, breaking chains, making waves. That's what I do. When they hate, I create.
We are live right now, right here. Guys, thank you for joining me tonight. What an amazing broadcast. A living legend, Steve Quayle. If you don't know who he is, you should look him up. You should go back and do your homework and check out thousands of broadcasts that this man has done on coast to coast, all over the place, all over the place. If you don't know who he is, I'm very surprised. But we're going to be doing that tonight. Before we get started, though, I would like to show you guys something here. Let me get this pulled up. I am going to be at both of these places. There's other places that I'm going this year, maybe. These for sure I've already committed to doing. Faithfluence in Kentucky, that one's coming up in a couple months. And then in Springfield, Missouri, we have the Remnant Rising 2.0. On that one right there, you probably see some familiar faces because I've had some of these people on my show, like Jamie Walden. I've had him on my show several times. I'll have him on again. Joe Horn, I've had him on the broadcast. I've had Vicky Joy on the broadcast, and I'm sure I'll have many others on the broadcast, but this would be a great place to meet us and also just to hear a lot of people's point of view about a lot of different things. It's going to be really cool, and Faithfluence is a great networking event to where you get to meet maybe some of your favorite artists, maybe some of your favorite influencers, and me. I mean, I'll be there hanging out with you guys, so I would enjoy meeting every single one of you. So check them out. I don't know how many tickets there are, so get them before they get sold out. Also, check out Nano Extreme Pain Cream. It's the only pain cream that goes through all 7 layers of the skin that gets right to the heart of the matter. No other pain cream on the market does this. Right now, if you go check it out, there are coupon codes in the description where you can get a discount or you can get free shipping. So check those things out. If you're in pain, there's no reason not to try it. Hundreds of the listeners, just like you, have already tried it. I've heard nothing but good things. So guys, check it out. You've got nothing to lose except for your pain, maybe. Steve Quayle.
The oral tradition that's passed on, usually from generation to generation, but there's always architectural or skeletal remains when it comes to the giants and the megalithic structures. They were not built by Hebrew slaves. I mean, Hebrew slaves did not build the Pyramid of Giza, you know? So I think the whole narrative is being upset. And I'm on record as saying God is going to reveal the secret things because the secrets are what have controlled us all for too long. So they're going to float the false alien gospel. They're already doing it. Movies like Prometheus and all of the aliens, in essence, being more extraterrestrial than extra dimensional. But I got to tell you, when I wrote my book, Aliens and Fallen Angels, The Sexual Corruption of the Human Race, that's almost 25 years ago. And in those days, some of the leading and most famous UFO researchers came to the conclusion that aliens were not extraterrestrials, but interdimensionals. Fast forward to Google's Willow chip and the looking for parallel universes, and when they found it, it freaked them out. And what freaked them out was they were seeing ancient symbols and they were seeing ancient entities, like, for instance, you brought up Gilgamesh, but a lot of the kings on what's called the Sumerian king list. And these were prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. And I won't even argue the controversy, which people don't believe in the pre-Adamic race. Well, look, in Jeremiah chapter 4 in the Bible, it talks about another flood that took place prior to the creation where there are no men and no cities, okay? And all of the greatest monuments, especially the pyramids of Giza, are showing double periods of erosion, water erosion. So it's important that people understand Egypt is in the news because Egypt is the linchpin to understanding the oldest civilizations in the world. And for the record, Cairo means city of Mars or encampment of Mars. And one of the most provocative stories out there was, if you remember 20 years ago, they're showing the pyramid and the face on Mars. Well, there's also there's faces on the US and in different parts of the world that point to the face on Mars. So it's kind of like their signature that they've been here. They, and I'm on record saying, are fallen angels. The Bible teaches that 1/3 of the fallen angels followed Lucifer. And it's like people think, they think of fallen angels as cherubs on the mantle. That's not what we're talking about. When you see the giant petroglyphs of it doesn't matter if it's the Sumerian kings or any of the larger entities in history, they're giants. They're truly giants. And my definition of giant is over 12 feet, okay? I mean, granted, 12 feet, you won't have NBA players that tall, but the point is that the great civilizations, the ancient civilizations, they all face a common denominator, and that's judgment. And I believe that that's what Peter is talking about, the world that was. So it's important, I think, for today. We were talking earlier, sorry, on record, but the disclosure that the President of the United States said was going to come within hours of that statement, 3.8 million documents disappeared. So it was, in my opinion, it's Pollyanna does the alien disclosure because I think Americans think that they'll ever be told the truth. And so, in essence, they'll never be told the truth until it can be shifted the way that Lucifer, i.e., Satan, wants it. And so they've been sitting on all this forbidden knowledge, what are called UPARTs, out of place artifacts, and covering up the true story of spiritual warfare taking place on earth prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. And in the Bible, it says, Genesis 6, there were giants in those days and after those days. Well, in those days, before the flood of Noah, and after those days, after the flood of Noah, I think that people become how should I say this, too gullible, and they don't do their own research. So that's where I think we are right now in disclosure. Steven Spielberg's movie Disclosure, I'm on record. I think that'll be the biggest movie in history, provided we're not at nuclear war with Iran this coming weekend. And so what's interesting to me is the fact that people who had the unrealistic expectation that the government's going to tell the truth, I got news for them. They never do. They never will, because this is a captive narrative and they'll bring it out when it suits their purpose. And the aliens are here to save us. The aliens created us. It's bogus. It's a direct attack upon the living God. And in my opinion, John, it's going to be the most distracting, destructive days ahead when we deal with that, because Jesus spoke about the signs, wonders in the heavens, and lying signs and wonders. So it's problematic. And one more thing, one of the stories that was carried on the Daily Mail is they now believe, and this is kind of like that the symbols through antiquity, whether it's at Göbekli Tepe, whether it's at all of the different artifacts around the world, whether it's on the alien skulls in Mexico. And for the record, I funded a multi-year-long expedition in Mexico where we dug up the artifacts. I didn't. I had a team. I'm not welcome in Mexico. And the point being, actually, a lot of places, but the point is, is that we proved it. We showed the provenance, and by the different star patterns on the skulls. What's interesting, how do skulls in Mexico have the same star patterns recorded as they do in the French cave of the French cave where all the drawings were at? I can't think of the name right now. Lascaux, in both the French and the Spanish caves, that they found all these what's called cave art, and they're not just people showing bison being hunted and eaten, etc., but they're star charts. And so the ancients believed they came from the stars. The Native Americans believed the star people, aliens. And the late Tom Horn and I did a movie called The Holocausted Giants. We went into the desert Southwest. We interviewed the Native American elders, the president of the Hopi, not only the Hopi, but the Pueblo people, and the late Cliff Mahooty, a Zuni elder. You used to see him on Ancient Aliens. He had a really cool bolo tie of an alien. And what we went there for was to get the information that most of the Native Americans, the desert Southwest, they don't like to talk about giants. I mean, they get kind of nervous, but when they found out they were with familiar territory, and meaning I'm not mocking them, Tom Horn's not mocking them, and they felt freer to talk to us. But they actually have a giant society, you'll love this, that meets multiple times a year in the desert Southwest of their, in essence, priestly class. I mean, shamans, everything from medicine men, they're what they call their holy men, and they have a meeting where they open up a stargate and a portal. I want to make a difference to people. Stargates take you from one place to the next, 2 points in the universe. It doesn't matter the distance, but you walk through one dimension, and the movie Stargate, SG-1, the whole series, pretty much showed the world what that was. But a portal takes you to different dimensions. So when Jesus said, the gates of hell will not prevail against his people. And he was talking about not Peter, he was talking about faith in the living God, that men's hearts are going to fail them, John, for things looking after those things coming upon the earth. We got about 100 years of stuff to talk about in an hour show. So in essence, I'll follow your lead, and I thank you so much. I told you before that we started recording, I love your t-shirt, okay?
Yeah.
Because again, Bigfoot is an interdimensional creature. Some of the Expedition Bigfoot would show, if you would, almost the Predator stuff. Anybody ever saw the movie, the first one, Predator? They had the ability to mask, but you could kind of make them out. And Bigfoot, they photographed it in Expedition, filmed it in Expedition Bigfoot, that they absolutely could see this translucent creature moving along the side of a riverbank and also moving within the realm of an electronic visual field they set up with cameras. And what's interesting in cameras, depending on the quality of the CCDs in the camera and everything, that they can pick up things on their charge couple device. They can pick up stuff that we can't see on normal film and we can't see with our normal eyes. We see in this much of the spectrum, I'm holding the fingers, and there's this much spectrum. So I think it's very telling and compelling that you and I are on together after the big brouhaha that we're going to get the truth on aliens. Well, I'll put the question to you if you don't mind. Who has the most to gain by stealing, by messing with the files of 3.8 million cases, references, and all the evidence? Who has the most to gain? I think it becomes obvious, but go ahead.
I think the fallen angels have the most to gain because I ultimately, in my mind, they are the ones that are in control of the data and how it's leaked to the people. And that's just my opinion, but I'm interested to hear your point of view on that.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And for the record, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time John and I have ever met or done an interview together, but you couldn't be more accurate. I funded a glyph project, GLYPH. Another way for that is ancient symbols, everything that you could see as a symbol. And we've been doing the best we could. Funds are limited. I mean, Google, we don't have that kind of money. We're doing with our capability, what we have, but we're up to 750,000 different sign symbols, rock art, and I mean, it doesn't matter. And there's a universal fallen angel language.
Hmm.
And even that's coming out today, and today is a record. Does this play today or does it play?
This will play tomorrow, actually. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's February 25th, tomorrow's the 26th, but it's so timely because we're watching, if you will, in real time, the influence of fallen angels. So back to my glyph project. My glyph project is composed of 8 experts from around the world, and for the record, none of them are in the United States. Some of these are U.S. citizens that fled the United States because of attempts on their life or attempts on their family. It's not melodrama, it's true. So, from different areas of the world, different continents, we've got ancient language specialists, we've got a couple archaeologists, we've got some computer guys that are so smart that, I mean, it's frightening they're smart. And so, I think we got to get across right now, the fallen angel realm, is actual fallen angels named within the Book of Enoch and also the Book of Giants. The Book of Giants also is a pseudepigraphal work. In other words, they were Dead Sea Scrolls too that were translated, but they teach over and over and over about the giants, the fallen angels. The giants are the fallen angels of offspring. They are not the giants themselves. 2 places in Genesis 6 and Numbers 13:33 that the word Nephilim occurs. But the root word for Nephil or Nephil, that's how they pronounce it, the Hebrew, and I may not even be pronouncing it right, but that means the fallen ones, okay? The fallen ones, not giants. Because after Numbers 13:33, famous passage in scripture, we were as grasshoppers in their eyes, meaning size-wise, and so we were in ours, okay? In essence, we knew where we stood. And the land's a horrible land, the spies said, because it devours its inhabitants. It was the fallen angels, their offspring. And I get into arguments with people. Well, how do fallen angels have sex? Well, it's real simple. The scripture teaches they can transform themselves into angels of light.
It was going
And
to be my next question too, because you know a lot of people talk about the shapeshifter stuff, but go ahead.
yeah, shapeshifting is the ability to go in and out of phase or dimension, okay? And so the shapeshifters are absolutely indicative of the fallen angels. Interesting, when we were in the desert Southwest, I asked the late Herbert Cliff Mahooty, I'm sorry, another guy named Herbert, and I said, what what is the requirement for the Native American elders who want to have the most power and to be able to shapeshift? I actually asked that question to a Zuni elder, Zuni, one of the most pragmatic and unusual tribes in this desert Southwest, Four Corners region. And he said they have to sacrifice their firstborn. I had never heard that ever in my life. So the point is, well, I'm sharing it now with your viewers, and it's important because fallen angels, again, were the ones that taught humanity how to do the dark arts, how to basically look at the heavens. A guy named Kokabel, not Tinkerbell, Kokabel, how to read what's going to happen in the future by the stars. That's not astrology. That is how should I say this, a teaching of the fallen angels. Now, astrologers can go wild with that when this planet's in this house. And now what you and I are talking about is cleaning the house of all of the misunderstandings. And I would say this is the lack of knowledge. So when we're back to the desert Southwest, I talked about the Giant Society. And in essence, the giants that are recorded in the desert Southwest were mostly cannibals, okay? And it was interesting because the Pueblo people, for instance, like at Mesa Verde, they built really unusual structures in the side and cliffs of the rock. And if you were looking at the horizon, you wouldn't see what was over the cliff edge because there were all sorts of small habitations that they hung out from the giants, but they were eaten. And that's when people say, well, I wonder where all the Native Americans went. They were eaten, Eaten. It wasn't a university they went to. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but what I am trying to tell people is when they begin to research, as you are a researcher, as I'm a researcher, they finally come to the conclusion, wait a minute, the Smithsonian has covered up all the lies, all the giants. Well, where are all the skeletons? I have an answer to that. They're in the Smithsonian because every time somebody finds a giant mean skeletal remains, the FBI and what they call the Smithsonian, the team, show up, take the remains, and then they basically threaten the people. If you open your mouth, I had a lady who lived in the Ohio River Valley. They owned some property. They dug up a giant in that case was, I think, 9.5, 10 feet. That's pretty tall. And they made the mistake of telling their postmaster they were excited. Immediately, he gets on the phone, calls the FBI, and within hours, I think she said, the feds are there and they're taking everything and they're scaring the heck out of the people that called in the first place. So I want to share this with any of your listeners. If you come upon anything that's out of place, keep your mouth quiet, take pictures, take a newspaper with you, seriously, and put the date up. Hold the newspaper up. I made one of the guys in Mexico that told me about the artifacts before we launched our expedition. I want to see these being unearthed in real time. And so back to the most important thing I want to leave your people with, your viewers and those who support you, is on my website, Gen6, GENSX.com. You can see the expedition. It's downloadable. You got to pay whatever it costs. But it's $149 or something. But it's the whole expedition. We filmed it from the ground. We filmed it from drones. We had them digging, and some of the depths of the artifacts were at 8 feet deep. And so people need to ask themselves, where did the Aztecs get the skill and ability to build this stuff? And for the record, well, I'm making the point in history. The Aztecs died the same way the Easter Islanders died. They ate themselves out of existence because they ate each other. They weren't just, tearing the hearts out of living uh, tribes around the area. They were cannibalizing the flesh, and it gets pretty gruesome. But they did not build the pyramidal structures because in the pre-Adamic world, the pyramids were all over the world. And remember, everyone, there were not oceans until the Great Flood. And so people say, you mean the first flood or the second flood? Well, the bottom line is probably before the first flood. Jeremiah, I think it's chapter 4, talks about that flood. I mentioned it earlier. And so what's astonishing is there are more pyramids underwater. For instance, off of Cuba, a Canadian team found in essence, what you see in Tenochtitlan or Tenochtitlan, it's underwater. There are a fabulous megaliths underwater in some of the areas that are in the mid-Atlantic. So what's important for people to understand is the technology was supranatural. It wasn't people sailing the ocean blue in 1492. A lot of the early explorers, especially the global explorers, Magellan recorded running into giants in Patagonia. The Egyptians, when Mark Antony and Cleopatra knew they were in trouble with Rome, they sent their son, Alexander Helios, on a world cruise to get him out. When I say world cruise, they sent him to the west because they knew of the lands to the west, obviously from Egypt, obviously in the, our hemisphere, and they landed throughout the United States. That's why you have such interesting Aztec DNA of showing Egyptian traces of the genetic material. And remember, everyone, that the Colorado River that, quote, they carved the Grand Canyon with, I categorically rejected. There is a law in physics that when two interplanetary bodies come into close proximity, The larger the planet, there's an electrical discharge. It's just called, and in essence, take a plasma cutting torch to a piece of metal. And that's what happened between Mars, and Mars has got every so many parallels to the desert Southwest, Valley Marineris in Mars, their Grand Canyon, yet ours Grand Canyon, and we're about a fifth of the size and the depth, etc. So something happened. And what's problematic is that across the world, and we were digging in Mexico, this is important. Our expedition team, the most, I think, most cataloged expedition on video that was not edited, it was not CGI, in real time, showing the alien, I'm talking now, the interdimensional entities, they're manipulating of DNA. The double helix that we see DNA, always represented by, we found that on artifacts, and some of the dates went back to 9,000 BC. Well, how did they know that? Because they ran the tests. And just a fabulous story because there's so much evidence, yet there's so much cover up. So understand, and I want this, I'm not saying for your sake, but for the viewer's sake, if they'll do their homework, they'll find a different world that was. But unfortunately, the giants are coming back in the Septuagint. God's talking specifically, I think, in Isaiah 13, and that giants are coming. God speaking, "Behold, I send them to fulfill my wrath." One of the most provocative investigations I've done over the last 25 years is the study of the genetic manipulation of Gilgamesh. By the way, in real time, I wasn't there, but I was informed when Gilgamesh was found in his tomb, okay? And the number one thing that a four-star general told me in ultra black ops, you know what ultra black ops is?
I
There's
don't know what it is, but I would assume that it's not only Black Ops, but Black Ops on steroids. That's
There
my
you
guess.
go. There you go. You couldn't be more accurate. It's a great way to describe it. But everybody wanted the DNA of Gilgamesh. And the whole story, Gilgamesh is, two-thirds fallen angel, one-third human. And when you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest poetic narrative in the world so far, it talks about monsters. It talks about war between giants. It talks about all the stuff that people think, well, that's crazy. It's not crazy, it's history. So again, and then Nimrod. Nimrod in the end of Genesis, Tom Horn brought this out when he was still on earth, alive, was that the scripture says he began to become a Gibborim, Gibborhim. And so there's some form of a transformation taking place in his life. And that took him from being someone and that he hated God. I think that's the thing that people need to understand. I'm sorry for my phone going off. I thought I had it off. Um, the the amount of genetic manipulation worldwide. Giants just don't appear in the Old Testament. They appear all over the world. And whether it's Australia, whether it's the island of Maui, whether it's Australia's outback, whether it's New Zealand, the presence of giants is always mentioned. And what's interesting, it's always in unusual places. For instance, in the area around Ayers Rock, Ayers, that's that red sandstone thing that just sticks out of the desert, and just very prominent. But I'm sorry, hold on. This makes me nuts when I forget to do this.
No problem, man. You were talking earlier before your phone rang, or the first time you were saying something about him not just transforming himself but hating God, and you never finished your thought.
His genetic manipulation was taking place, John, in real time. And what's important, now it's off. I apologize to everybody. That the amount of manipulation that was taking place was recorded worldwide, okay? And so, for instance, the Hawaiian Islands also have giants, but they have the little creatures, and we don't have time to talk about them, but they were called the Menehune, okay? And what's interesting is little creatures are found all over the world. I'm in Montana, literally 150 miles south of me, as south by southeast, were the Shoshone tribe, and they were in their legends talking about little people that were fierce warriors. By the way, they were also cannibals. And so, what's important that to people that understand, it was the fallen angels that taught humans everything from cannibalism to abortion. Okay. I've done my homework. I've been at this for 54 years since I met Jesus 54 years ago. And the Genesis 6 narrative was what really provoked my interest in the real history of the world. And so, what's also fascinating, all through from 1066, even through, from the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, they had paintings with flying saucers in them, and they recorded it in their paintings or in the Bayeux Tapestry. You see this weird stuff. And all through the art, you can look it up, anybody can look it up on an internet search, aliens in ancient art or in Renaissance art. And I have a fascination with art history. That was kind of my thing in college. I was a filmmaker. I have a couple degrees in motion picture production and still photography. And I've been a still photographer for 54 years. And so what's interesting is that I've been able to go to some of the most unusual places. For instance, in the Valley of the Gods, in the desert Southwest, which would be, I'm trying to get my directions right, would be east of Monument Valley. There are pyramids that have been eroded by wind and weather, and I've had guys who, are computer literate to actually plot the base of it, and it's not a natural phenomenon. And when we were in, this is interesting, when we were in the desert Southwest, I'm talking about Tom Horn and myself and the entire film teams, we were always under surveillance from a drone, okay? Always. You could see it. And they were incredibly concerned that where we were, we wouldn't go in the area that was off limits. And off limits would have been to it would have been to the south of us, okay? So why were they so interested? And when we were digging up the relics, and again, I was not in Mexico. When they were my team, I'm the one that was the producer, the director, and the payor. The amount of intelligence agencies would be off the chart. And my lead investigator of that, Jesse G, I mean, they were screwing camera holes in his apartment. He had to move 4 times from the Baja, then different places in Mexico. And every place he went, he was tracked. And they would always see, and in that area, by the way, the area that we dug up most of our artifacts was Tula, Tula, or Tulum, where you see the flat pyramid and the statues that look like Easter Island. And there's so many artifacts, they even show up on eBay because the Mexican peasants are so broke, that they'll sell anything. And I actually bought some in addition to what we dug up, But we're talking about enough photographs and enough possession. I can't bring those in the United States. There's a law in the United States that is the Native American Grave Protection Act, NAGPRA or something like that. And possession of them, I'd have the 3-letter folks on my back. And therefore, they know what was going on. They know where the artifacts are. They didn't care about anything, John, except that they not be brought in the United States. So they're covering up. I have literal personal experience, and I won't go into detail, with how much they don't like talking about giants or talking about the aliens. And ladies and gentlemen, it's beyond question. Again, they can go on my website, gen6.com, and you'll see the alien expeditions. You can get the DVDs, and when you get the DVDs, we put out a compendium on all the different alien species that we came across. And then an interesting statement is by the Vatican's, this is important, it all relates, the Vatican's a head astronomer named Guy Comsalogno. I won't even try and spell it, but Comsalogno. And they were talking about the Vatican's position of all things are created by God. This is the people that I come up against all the time. I come from a biblical perspective. I don't think anyone, by the grace of God, this is what I'm called to do, has presented more books, more evidence of the alien presence and being related to the fallen angels. Back to Google, with their state-of-the-art Willow chip, they shut down their looking, or they shut down their findings on parallel universes because ancient civilization, Sumerian texts, a lot of the texts that we had deciphered on our own, apart from Google, and they spent hundreds of billions of dollars, and they were all talking about names out of the Book of Enoch, out of the Book of Giants, and talking about stuff that flipped them out. And so, in essence, when we're talking about AI, I'm just shifting there right now. I call that alien infestation. When I use the term alien in that sense, I mean extra dimensional creatures who are very soon going to manifest in our physical realm. Bigfoot, again, is an example. And, we're talking about portals. And so, portals and stargates are really prominent in our findings because we find them all over the world. And one of our latest DVDs, and this is mind-blowing stuff, is there's just not a single Stargate in some place in Middle East, but we show dozens of them. And Hitler, when he sent out his search team for anything supernatural or that was mystical, they found some gates, and they looked like the original opening scene of Stargate SG-1.
Yeah, this seems to be represented majorly in Hollywood right now. That's like I would say out of like the last 5 years, almost everything. And then, Project Stargate, a Donald Trump headlined with Palantir and all of the big tech people, man. It's crazy because the symbology, like something you studied as well as me, the symbology behind all this tells us pretty much all of what we need to know about these projects. But it's amazing.
It's like this. Forgive me for I don't ever mean to
No,
over.
please. Listen. I want to say something first. I'm well fine with you overriding me. I've been listening to you since I don't even remember 2009, 2010 probably. I was working in a tool and die shop, and as I was making designs or building things, I was listening to you, Tom Horn, Russ Dizdar, a bunch of different people. Every single day. In fact, you're the reason I've got silver at all. I think I listen to you every time I listen. I'd be like, I got to go buy some silver. So feel free to override, man. I'm love listening to this.
Well, yeah, and I apologize because you know, I have double hearing aids, okay? And it's not an excuse, it's just my stupidity. I used to be an extreme scuba diver, and I used to be really into large caliber 44 Magnums, 454 Casuls. And like a fool, I didn't wear my earmuffs, okay? So that broken eardrums, loud noises, and then in my rock and roll days, I wasn't a good guitar player, but I sure knew how to hit power chords and a lot of distortion and a lot of noise, okay? So it's funny that there's nothing more I enjoy than talking or being interviewed by someone like you that isn't flattery, that knows what you're talking about, knows what I'm talking about. And by the way, silver is back up to $90 an ounce today, and today again is the 25th of February. Gold just broke 52.50, and it's only going to go up. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you this warning. Right now, the situation in Iran said these are our red lines. The United States said, no, you cannot have uranium enrichment. And I'm pretty much a history buff, especially when it comes to the Kingdom of Persia. Excuse me. Persia was the largest and the most powerful supernatural kingdom in the world. And why can I say that? Because Daniel, the prophet in captivity, was praying for God to give him an answer on how much longer would the Jews be in captivity. And, Michael the archangel, one of the first things you read in the book of Daniel is, Daniel, O man of God, from the time you first set your heart to hear, I was sent originally, and then obviously Gabriel came to help Michael, but the prince of Persia withstood me, okay? Fast forward 20 years ago, I was into clandestine nuclear weapons because I got tired of the lies coming out of the liars extraordinaire. Any official, oh no, Iran, you know, is years away. No, they're not. They were Pakistan, they were selling complete nuclear weapons, selling warheads, selling all of the triggering devices, selling everything to only Arab nations on the one commandment of Dr. Khan, Khan, that they use it against the United States. Okay, and so we're there right now. I'm telling you point blank, everyone. Iran has the largest missile production facilities in the world. They're too far and too far into the side of mountains to deal with. There's nothing the United States possesses in megatonnage in nuclear weapons throw weight that we can even touch them. Even our quote, big, badass, beautiful 30,000 pound bombs. You know what that's like? That's like going up to a mountain of granite, spitting on it and say, there, take that. You run out of saliva before that mountain will come down. It's that pathetic. So today, I'm sorry, today is what I've said, 25th. In the next couple days, there's a meeting that's supposed to be taking place in Geneva for the final talks before the war breaks out between Iran and the United States. So I'm just telling everybody that because of the work that we're doing in the Glyph project, we see the plans of the evil ones. And from day one, I want everybody to know this. I'm talking pre-Adamic times. Lucifer was hailed as a god of this world, little g. And so I find it fascinating that now we're brought to the point where we're up against the most evil supernatural kingdom in the world. And it took both archangels, Michael and Gabriel, to break through the Prince of Persia. That's talking about an entity. It's not talking about, well, an heir of this or that. Those are entities, the Prince of Persia. And over every nation in the world, there are principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in the unseen realm, Ephesians chapter 6. So today, while being on your show, I find this really interesting because we're watching in real time the fulfillment of the prophecies, I believe, that are in the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, Isaiah, Jeremiah 50 and 51. I'm not just throwing scripture out. That's part of my life. That's part of my foundation. And by the grace of God, I tell people the Word of God is my foundation. Jesus has led me to be able to go in so many directions at once. People say, you never stick to one subject. I say, you can't address this subject in a single sentence. There were giants in those days and after those days. Well, what days? Well, what giants, And so what is especially critical to me is, ladies and gentlemen, the super soldier program, let me bring it right into our time frame, is ongoing, has been ongoing for decades. And I used to have a acquaintance that was one of the three-letter agency's top assassins. He heard me on Coast to Coast, contacted me, and he said, you got to hear what I got to tell you. And he talked about the different islands, plural, of Dr. Moreau, famous fictional book about a scientist who tries to combine animals and human beings. There's a movie about that. But for instance, people don't understand, like in New Guinea, there's a huge underground base, and they call them DUMBs. And I tell people deep underground military bases, but they're experimental laboratories where they take humans and they manipulate their DNA. And one of the things that makes me cry when I talk about it is here's an assassin telling me, cold-blooded, he's dead now, by the way, telling me about the creatures he saw in cages at one of the deep underground military bases. And they were combination, if you will, leopards and men, They were every form of genetic composite, and they were crying out, "Help me, I'm human." And he said, with tears in his eyes, "Steve, they weren't human." And so I don't think people understand the depth of depravity. I don't think they understand the fallen angel influence on depravity. I don't think they understand the fallen angels that came to Mount Hermon, and by the way, that's where Israel's intelligence agency used to be, and it got blown up. And, everything is put on a need to know basis. And I categorically reject, and I want to make this clear, at no time when I was associated with the world of ultra black, if you know what I mean, look it up, was I required to sign an NDA. I wouldn't have signed it. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. I've never been with the U.S. military. I've never gotten a paycheck from them, but because of my knowledge in this realm, I was tapped into that world. And one of the most powerful statements, a four-star general, special ops, not a friend of a friend who had a top secret clearance, said, "Remember, Steve, when you look into the abyss stares back at you." Well, that's a statement that obviously is world famous, and that general picked it up. And you can't get involved in this stuff to the level without coming to some really dangerous conclusions. But the conclusions I came at, and this is why I'm talking about writing about it, after a dozen books and 12 films and eyes on the ground, ears on the ground. By the way, I was always a fan of aerial photography. And even now, for instance, I'll just bring this up. We just produced a new video on Yellowstone Park. I'm reaching for my video behind my computer. Yellowstone, when you see Yellowstone Park, always, if they have earthquakes, it's going to blow, it's going to blow. Super volcano, it's not a super volcano. If it did, well, it blew 600,000 years ago. But the magma beneath the magma chamber in Yellowstone is moving. Where I'm pointing is to the west and to the north, the Cascadia region. So Yellowstone, let's see if I can, there you go. This is available now, and this film is over 54 years of my effort because I filmed Yellowstone first and foremost in still photography as a still photographer, and then as an aerial photographer, use the most sophisticated camera system in the world. That's not bragging. It's showing people what they don't know about Yellowstone. And by the way, these individuals who are using computer-generated images and AI, they're showing normal crevasses, splits in rocks with magma superimposed in it. So I want people to know I spent 4.5 years of my life in the air in helicopters. Helicopter time from me to Yellowstone Park is 60 minutes in like a Bell 407 and A stars and Bell 206s. These are the helicopters most people would be familiar with. And we shot hundreds of hours of footage. And in the last, this is interesting, you'll find this, there's supposed to be no life forms in any of the geyser pools. This is grand prismatic. But on the last day of the last hour of shooting, after 4 or 5 years, we found a unusual creature that looks like a starfish. It's in the movie. There's no way anything of that developed level can exist in the temperature of the water is one thing, but the acidity and the alkalinity is another. And so to come to Yellowstone, it's a lot of money, but now there's so many people there, you never see it. So I can guarantee you there's no film like this, and I have been doing it for 54 years of my life of filming and videoing it. And we used what's called a shot over or a Cineflex camera. Those are the ones you see on the front of a helicopter. They have some of them have 5-axis stabilization, and we were able to maintain the altitude requirements. But when I say this, we could see individual sulfur crystals in the water. We could see individual clumps of what are called cyanobacteria. And so, again, this can be purchased on my Gen 6 website. And if you're planning a trip to Yellowstone, boy, there's no better way to save a lot of money because this thing is epic. It was all shot in 8K. Most people can't resolve 8K. There's no televisions that can resolve it yet. But the point is that it's mind-blowing. And every astrobiologist, every exobiologist, every planetary microbiologist comes to Yellowstone because I call it God's palette of creation. And every color of the rainbow and every combination of colors are represented in Yellowstone, and it's the only place where you can see 60 to 70% of all the world's geyser features and geothermal features. And so when, let's say, a steamboat geyser goes off, there are hydroclastic explosions of hot water, but it's not magma. So I want everyone to know this, that this is you can save yourself a lot of money. You don't have to deal with morons that park in the middle. I'm sorry, I'm blunt. Morons that park in the middle of a highway and just get out and want to see the bears, or want to touch the buffalo. And we used to call them stupid tourist tricks, okay? But there's no animals in this. This isn't a show and tell. This is way beyond that. For instance, there are places in Yellowstone, and the people see it, that look exactly like the surface of Jupiter. And so we show people, and also the Helix Nebula, not double helix, is exactly like Grand Prismatic, and it's called the Eye of God. So what's fascinating is this is available, and in essence, this is kind of my I guess what you'd call, I'm sorry, you can't see there. There you go. It's my final project of filming, because let's just say this, everything runs out of steam, including me. But my passion is the Glyph project. And we're believing God to we need serious money for that. Well, I've spent a couple million. We need way more than that. And, the thing is that if somebody's looking, and I actually am putting this out on purpose, if someone who has no relatives and no one to leave their money to, we have a foundation that will accept the funds, and we can then get done what we need to get done on the Glyph project worldwide. And so it's a critical thing. So what I'm trying to get across today, and again, thank you for the invite, is that the supernatural events that took place in the past are now coming into our present. And when that happens, John, the words of Jesus are going to come into a real relevance, that men's hearts will fail them for fear, for looking after those things coming upon the earth. And for the record, the Glyph report is available, $250 a year. We just released probably 50 images that I guarantee you nobody in the West has ever seen before. I know UFO photos and stuff, but this is creatures. And these are creatures that basically bred and were photographed, 100 years ago. By the way, photography's been around a long time. And the point is that it provokes awe, because most people think of giants as, ho, 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 Valley of a Green Giant or whatever. But we're talking about giant creatures that look like a combination of Mothman and Stegosauruses. Stuff that's so out there, okay? And I tell people, look, I've been out there. I know what this stuff looks like. I want you to know. And my whole purpose in everything is to prepare the people of God for the times that are starting now upon us, that are so hideous. The Epstein reveal is problematic from the standpoint it goes so far into so many different areas of genetic manipulation and perversion and the human genome manipulation. And ladies and gentlemen, it's hard for any human being to wrap their minds around this. I'm going to give everybody a definition of bloodlust. This is what God gave me when I was really in prayer of this. The appetite of demons expressed through humans. So, when you've got people that are cannibalizing, the famous mass murderers, chopping people up, blah, 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 a demon is a disembodied spirit of a giant. A demon is not a fallen angel. I hope that, that's clear to everyone because I hear them, the names, they're not interchangeable. And the word Nephilim, two times in the Old Testament, it changes to Rephaim. And Rapha means the dead. It means the fallen ones. God calls the things that, sure, they're alive. Well, they're alive, but they're the dead ones. The scripture says, shall the dead rise to praise you? That's talking about what Enoch is revealing in the book of Enoch. And by the way, the book of Enoch is not a book, it's fragments. And most people don't realize that Enoch was given 360 books, one for each year of his life. And God showed him all the mysteries of the heavens, all the mysteries of the unseen world. And guess who bought everything they could and used muscle to get everything they couldn't? It was the famous banking houses in the world. Um, and if you don't know who those are, they both are well, they're the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. So the point that is problematic is what are they so controllingly afraid of that people find out, and I'll give it to everybody. It's the biblical narrative explains the origin of good and evil. It explains the redemption of Jesus. 1 John 3:8 says, for this purpose was Jesus, the Son of God, manifested that he might destroy the works of the evil one. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you see geoengineering, weather warfare, I wrote the first book on that 20 some years ago called Weather Wars and Unnatural Disasters. Dame Wigington has done a great job, geoengineeringwatch.org, but I can't deal with ignorance and chemtrails. Those are truly geoengineering mechanisms in play that are killing our atmosphere, killing our food, causing drought. And I'm in Montana. This is February, close to the end of it, and we don't have any snow on the ground. We have just a little snow on our mountains, and it's going to be problematic. And Montana has the headwaters of the Missouri River. And if we don't have snow melt is what fills reservoirs and basically are the headwaters of the biggest rivers in the world, and especially in the United States. I don't mean like the Amazon, but the point is that the weather is being destroyed. And in the book of Revelation, God declares He's going to destroy those who destroy the earth. So, God can use the wicked. It says in Scripture that God takes the wicked in their devices. And so we're watching right now geoengineering. It's to generate starvation. I did a video that's really critical. Nobody else did it. It was called Mega Drought. And in Mega Drought, I flew again in helicopters filming the entire Colorado River Basin. Interesting, the areas of the Grand Canyon are off limits. And those are some of the areas that have been, Kincaid's Cave, which is Smithsonian said doesn't exist, except how is it that they have his actual 34,000 archaeological finds in the Smithsonian? And they said, well, he never kept a document. Well, upon investigation, I found out that the publisher of the Phoenix Gazette, who carried that story, initially was paid 10,000 in cash. And in those days, that was a lot of money to basically step away from the story and then just leave it to myth or it never happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, if they don't buy you off, they threaten you off. If they don't threaten you off, they kill you off. And unfortunately, I hate to say it this way, but I'm one of the last guys standing. And I can only say that God has something for me to impart to the younger generation. Now, look, you can go on YouTube, you'll hear some of the most abhorrent aberrations of the Genesis 6 narrative. Those who hate Jesus and hate the living God, they want, I would say this, an auxiliary presentation of history. Well, when they say the aliens created us, they say, well, who created the aliens? See, you can't get those people to bring to the content. Well, they already existed. I said, no, they didn't. What, the Big Bang or the big, you got to be careful, the big, beautiful bag of BS? And so, in essence, we're giving to people on your show today, and thank you so much again. We're giving them a quick overview. And somebody will always say to me, well, you're not linear. My answer is, how do I cover, pre-Adamic history and history in this shorter broadcast? And for the record, I must have been crazy. I spoke for 5 hours straight, nonstop, and my voice tends to go, and just went on and on and on, and then fielded questions in real time. Like I said, what a stupid thing for me to have done. But a lot of good information is out there, and I would tell people this: the videos and the audios that Tom Horn and I did, they are classic. They went worldwide. There was no greater researcher, in my opinion, no greater receiver of revelation, in my opinion, than Tom Horn. And if you watch Tom Horn, he was an anomaly and a phenomenon. And God was so great. Most people don't realize he died, and God gave him a vision of the future. He was in heaven. And the bottom line is that God told him that he would only remember some of the stuff as it was shortly to come to pass. And so I took it hard when he passed away because all the time we worked together over 20 some years, I was on this rail. We were both on the track on this rail. Jesus was our engine and he was our guidance, but we would never talk to each other about a show ever. And we would end up on the same track at the same destination, pointing to the same magnificence of our Lord Jesus Christ. And that people just can't believe that. Well, I have a statement. I made it. And I don't know if you've ever chosen wrong, friends. Boy, I'm the world, because people will join themselves to you for what you know to make it their own. I call them basically spiritual sponges, okay? Or pariahs. Or they're like a heroin addict, we'll call it a monkey on his back. By the way, I've never been a heroin addict, but the point is, I've interviewed a lot of them who Jesus has set free. So, I hope I've given you kind of an overview, and I'll just shut up now, if that's possible. And you just ask me questions because you've got to list them. I'll answer them as you ask me.
Yeah, and I appreciate that words of wisdom as well, because this is this world that we're in is really, really difficult to navigate. Who are leeches and who are people that are going to walk alongside in what
Yes.
you do. And Tom Horn, I mean, he is definitely one of the greats. I've got almost all, I think I got all his books, but I've interviewed his son Joe as well. And I regret not ever being able to actually be able to talk to Tom Horn. And this is really, for me, I'm really thankful to do it. So I do have a couple questions for you. Really just one. You answered amazingly. It's crazy because everything that I wrote down on this notebook before we talked, you spoke about at some point or the other. But one thing I really want to hit home about, because right now we're talking about disclosure. This is like on everybody's lips. It's on the president supposedly releasing things about this. There's a lot of researchers that have come up alongside you, not just alongside you, but during your time. And I remember at one point there was really no discrepancy about what these beings are, these aliens are. Most people would be pretty on board with saying, yes, these are fallen entities or they're demonic entities or, something along those lines. But there seems to be a real switch in that lately. Like I'm talking about lately, just within the last year.
Yep.
People switching their mindset towards these things are either another race of human or they are machines or it is military. What is the truth about this? Because I think the big deception, this question really does matter, I think, in a lot of people's minds. It matters in my mind. I know that.
Well, first of all, when you look at technology, and I'm a researcher of ancient technology and everything from how stargates are powered, how portals are opened, the advances of even architectural processes that we can't duplicate today, like the Temple of Baalbek, Baalbek, and the stones that weigh, thousands of tons. Well, how do they put those together with not enough of a seam to get a razor blade in? But and I hope I understand your question. Stop me if I don't. People would rather believe that the aliens created us, and that's a false narrative. That's the devil's lie to take people away from God, who created the creator of heaven and earth, who sent Jesus to redeem us, fallen man, and the devil is destroying everything. And I think what people need to realize is that we're not just talking about giant bipedal human looking, we're looking at spiders that are just incredibly ugly. And I tell people this, I say, look, where do you think the monsters, excuse me, that Hollywood comes up with? They're not just, on an LSD trip or popping microdosing mushrooms. They're basically seeing these things, and all Hollywood. Look, I have degrees in film history. I was a sci-fi buff. I wrote a couple scripts. They were all based on the alien deception. And the point is that they want to have a false narrative to keep people from coming into a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ where they can escape hell. And the devil's position is he wants every human being destroyed. The singularity movement, Ray Kurzweil singularity, and all of the offshoots of combining humanity with automatons is like a Star Trek series on the Borg, okay? They're trying to assimilate us into an extra biblical entity, and they're saying God, the God of heaven, like Yuval Harari. Okay, that there's no contempt I have for more than him, except Carl Schwab the slob, in my opinion. And the thing that's interesting is they hate God so much that Yuval Harari, he's a little guy that looks like, in my opinion, he looks like an alien. And they are mocking the Christians for what they believe. Unfortunately, there are those who claim to be Christians, and this goes to your question. There are not extraterrestrials. There are extra dimensionals. Google proved that. Everybody's buzzing on AI, alien infestation, alien integration. And I never thought of this, but alien implants, okay? Now, in implants, I just don't mean, a device in the back of your neck or wherever they hide it in your sinuses. I'm talking about entities that are truly aliens. And I don't have an answer to this question, but this is my own big question. I'm believing God will give it to me. How long can a fallen angel stay in human form? Because the Bible says that they can manifest as angels of light, then how much more his servants? So I'm making the statement. What most people think is humanity running the world is not humanity. They are fallen angels and earth drag, okay? And because they deceive. Somebody knows if something shows up with eyes all over and looks like the worst nightmare you've ever seen on science fiction, people won't receive that. But if they show up the aliens taking the form of a seductress or a seductor, like for instance, a good example of that would be the Palladians, okay? And they always, blonde, tall, blue-eyed, good-looking, and people say, well, see, those things look like they're humans. Well, they're not. So, what is the level of deception that's coming at this point, John, that you and I are on this podcast is beyond anything. When Jesus said, "This is," I love the Lord, but I love his statements. There's so much. Everything he said is multidimensional. That there's coming a time when men will not endure sound doctrine, but they'll believe everything that points away from Jesus. I'll give you a good example. Zachariah Sitchin. I've read all his works. Our film crew that was in Rome, I forget how many years ago, maybe close to 8 or 10 now, uh, got one of Zachariah Sitchin's best friends, an Italian billionaire, I forget his name. And the thing is, it's on our video, Holocaust of Giants, and literally told the camera that, and the cameramen, that Zachariah Sitchin would have Anunnaki, and that's what they call them. I call them Anunnaki, like Anunnaki, okay? Because, it's kind of like the old cheesy worst movie in history, Earth Women Are Easy. But he said to me, Zachariah Sitchin would be taught, and I would say subverted, by a literal fallen angel talking to him in his bedroom with just Zachariah Sitchin and himself. And that we catalog that. The guy's on screen, you know. And so what's astonishing to me is people will call him Anunnaki. Anunnaki. That's based on a Sumerian god, Anu or Anu. And it's it's nothing but absolute abandonment to something you cannot prove. But the only word I can use at this point is total deception and the desire to destroy humanity. And Jesus said, if God the Father didn't shorten the days for the elect's sake, there'd be no flesh left alive. It's not just humans, because what we find is seriously, they went after animals. And that was an interesting thought that maybe you've thought of before, but why is it that God brought the animals two by two, or actually some type cases four, to the ark? It's because only God Himself knew the animals that hadn't been impregnated, genetically manipulated by fallen angels. And in my book, Genesis 6 Giants, I quote a poem, an epic poem about a fallen angel who falls in love with a heifer. Boy, these must have been really ugly women-wise. And the thing is that this is stuff recorded in history, you know? And so it's so beyond it's beyond the normalcy and the normalcy bias. We can only embrace what we can see, pretty much. So when you hear this stuff, it's I'm out there. I've been saying, oh, he's crazy, blah, 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 blah. But when things begin to happen, and they say, "Oh man, I get this all the time. I heard you on Coast to Coast in I think 1995 or 2005, whenever I was on Coast, and I became a regular guest." But the thing that fascinates everyone worldwide, children and adults alike, is the giants. And to answer this question, I want to make it very clear. The reason that all of the giant skeletal remains are not open for people to see or their technology, because the Smithsonian and the whole group of people that have been bought off, for instance, Egypt, Egypt has a civilization underground that exceeds what Egypt is above ground. It's called the Citadel of Giants. Within the Sahara Desert, there's ancient cities of giants, and it's covered by the sands. And one of the statements I made in a DVD I made, what, Inflection Point, I think, is that the sands of destiny are going to be blown away by the winds of God's revelation. And when Jesus said, this is critical, this kind of blows my mind. There's never been a time like this, nor never would be again. And except God shortened the days, there'd be no human beings left alive. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're seeing the shortening of days. You can wonder where last week went, where did last month go, and think back a couple years. Where were you, John? Where was I? 2 years ago in 2024 at this. What I'm saying is that the way our brains work, only the living God could do that. And within a cell of a human body, there's over 1 million biochemical processes that take place. And when I go to again, Yellowstone National Park and find out that one bacteria out of the mushroom geyser pool changed the history of genetic engineering and bioweapons warfare development, that has way more catastrophic consequences than Yellowstone's going to blow. Yellowstone's going to blow. The area for people to watch is the Cascadia Subduction Zone. You're always hearing it. That's the big one. We interviewed some of the smartest scientists in the world, geologists. Just there's no contest how smart these people are. But they say when people think of supervolcanoes, I think Emily, I forget her last name, said this on screen, they think of Yellowstone. But she said that's not it. There are 11 active volcanoes are coming active on the Cascadia region right now. And if you just look at Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, up around where Mammoth Hot Springs are, and also Mount Shasta. You can't even look at Mount Shasta's history without time tunnels, portals, stargates, aliens, UFOs. And you go to Mexico City and you see volcanoes erupting. Popo, I won't even try and pronounce that one, Popo. And I think it's Popocatépetl, or I call it Popocatépetl. That's not right. But going into the volcanoes and coming out of the volcanoes. And, somehow they recharge their batteries. For the record, I personally am tired of hearing about Roswell, New Mexico. Based on my investigations and interviews, 46 different events happened after Roswell. You know, even the Klecksburg bell that's in Pennsylvania. I mean, people don't realize even the Nazi bell, their first spacecraft looks like the Vimanas of India had ancient glyphs on them. Well, we've translated those ancient glyphs, and what it is praise to Lucifer. And they don't call him Satan, they call him Lucifer. He demands his followers call him Lucifer. And Jesus is the light of the world. But see, the devil knows his time is short. The scripture tells us, woe unto the inhabitants of the earth. For the devil knows he's got short time, I'm paraphrasing, and has come down to earth having great wrath. So we're seeing the beginning of wrath, and we're seeing the beginning of unimaginable revelations. Good example, Terminator, okay? James Cameron, what a great movie when it first came out. And I see him when people ask about, well, this is just like you wrote, directed, and produced the Terminator, and his exact words were, I tried to warn you, but you would not listen. Now, James Cameron is a bright, above genius level. As a filmmaker, that holds true, but as someone who's a futurist, that holds really true. As some of his best film works, I'm not talking about the Titanic, but I'm talking about the science fiction stuff he did was, off the planet, literally. So, in my opinion, he is probably one of the most forthright people producing films that are taking place right now because everything's AI, AI, AI. And when people go on, I don't, by the way, even our team doesn't go. We have to segregate our computers so the alien infestation does not get into them, okay? Because when you have little boys asking, Chat GPT, are you a fallen angel? And there's literally an example of this. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah.
And he says, yes, but I'm a good one.
Yeah.
So, the seduction is the reduction of the biblical narrative, and we're going to have one hellstorm and hell of a hellstorm uh, beginning very quick. And I believe today, I'm serious, I believe this was the time you and I were to talk and you and I were to set the record straight that we're going to release UFO files. Lies, they didn't. Oh, I'm trying to find this out. Who gave the order to steal those? Well, I'll tell you who did it. I don't know the exact names, but it was the three-letter agencies because they're the ones who controlled it. The Men in Black are real. I call them the suits. You start having too much success in this realm, and the suits show up. They either threaten you, buy you off, or threaten they're going to kill your kids. I can tell you this, that world is real, and I have personally experienced it.
I can believe that, man. I can believe that. And I appreciate you, Steve, for coming on. And I really want to talk to you again. I don't want this to be the only time we talk because there's really so much we could talk about. Like you said, it all folds in together nicely to create this narrative. And I think that you did a great job of covering that. I appreciate that a ton. Once again, tell people where they can find your stuff. I'll put the links down below us in this video in the description, but let people know.
GENSIX.com. If they go to my website, Steve Quayle, spelled QUAYLE.com. If they go to on the upper right-hand banner, we have a whole website devoted to all this wild stuff, okay? And it'll show a giant that was literally seen alive in the late 1800s, and almost like the story of Gulliver's Travels. And it was it's the giant you see overlooking a cliff at Mesa Verde. That's real. And so what I did was, and this is important for people, others are doing it. God bless them. But I cataloged every newspaper article that we were aware of and made aware of during the time of the production of the Holocaust of Giants. But it really becomes effective in my DVD. It's called, oh, good night, Forbidden History. The Forbidden History. It was going to be the first of a multi-series, but the guy that I was working with passed away. And by the way, thank you for asking me on because our mutual friend Joe Horn said, "You got to talk to Jon. He knows what you're talking about." So kudos to you.
Yeah.
And anytime you want me on of some weird crap, and there'll be weird crap happening every day,
Oh
okay?
yeah, every day.
And people get offended at the word crap. Well, I got news for you. That's a nice version. So I'm available to you, and I don't make that statement lightly. I won't talk to new people that don't believe in giants. I won't talk to anybody. And I'm old enough. My time is the only thing I got left, and my relationship with Jesus, okay?
Amen.
I'm 74, and I think for a guy who's 74, I'm still knocking it out, but I'm not as fast as I used to be. So I'm told in my Bible, as is in the Bible, commit what you know, Paul's, into faithful hands. And so I appreciate you. And I
Thank you.
just don't like talking to people that don't know what they're talking about. In my opinion, you know, I'm controversial. But isn't it interesting that the people that are talking about demons, Tucker Carlson, doesn't understand what demons are? The
Yeah.
people, Joe Rogan, there's so many conflicting, which by the way, I think he's a great podcaster, but or redacted with Clayton Morris. These guys are only getting bits and pieces, but they're missing the bottom line. You can have every branch of the fruit of evil and miss the root of evil.
Mhm.
What the Lord in His mercy has taught me is if you identify the root and what you just said, it's fallen angels, then the fruit of evil makes all the sense in the world. Try and deal with the world, and without understanding that, it just doesn't work. So, in essence, please take me up at my offer because if you'll put the links up to Gen 6, if you go on my website, you'll see stevequayle.com, but on the top right, that's the most important part of my website. That's my life's work there. And Yellowstone is a passion to show people that what's going on in Yellowstone? It's God's palette of creation. And I say, you want to see the fingerprints of God? I know that Graham Hancock wrote that book. It's in this movie. It's in this film. And I don't think many people, well, for the record, I'm the only guy that's ever recorded it for a half a century. And I said, what does that make me? A half a centurion? But the point is, yeah, almost a three-quarter a centurion. But it's that important. And a couple of the films we've done on the alien disclosure, the lies of men and gods. And if you would put that up, there are specific links to these videos if you don't know.
Yeah, sure.
And
Send them to me after this is over if you don't
I
mind.
will.
That
I
way I can
will.
put them on there.
And thank you so much for the time together. And that's an open invitation to you. I enjoyed immensely.
Appreciate
You
that.
can tell, man, this is where my heart is,
Yeah.
okay? And thank you for recognizing I do have the bona fides to talk about this because Jesus gave me a command, and I saw Jesus face to face. I've been taken before the judgment seat of Jesus Christ, translated, and that's a big deal when you see Jesus, who is your Savior. Now
Yeah.
he's not, this isn't heaven and hell, the judgment seat of Christ. It's have I been faithful with the gifting He's given me, and what's been uh, faithful to turn people to Him, versus just everybody wants a kingdom. I don't. I want His kingdom come. Everybody wants to be somebody. I want to tell people, I could care less about me. I want to tell people about Jesus. And so when people say, well, how do you know all this stuff? I said, simple, Jesus. That's not fake. It's not half-ass. It's the truth. And so again, I appreciate you, and this is a treat for me because I'm worn out with people that don't get it.
Yeah.
I just really am. And
Yeah.
and I won't do any more talk radio. I'm not on the big ones. I'm not on Alex Jones. I'm not on with Mike Adams anymore. I'm on my Q files. My Q files is by subscription only. My private briefings by subscription only. But the most mind-boggling thing, okay, of everything I know is in the Glyph project, and that's by subscription. So I'll send you those links. And
Please
I
do.
thank you for it. And God bless you, my brother. This is
Yeah.
a treat for me. This is like dessert. And I believe you eat dessert first and then worry about the rest of the meal. But again, I'm excited that you have the passion in your heart for the truth and that you understand and have done your homework. Because, oh, I forget who it was. Um, one of the most famous scientists in the world right now. He said, it's Sir Isaac Newton. He said, I'm not smart. I just get to stand on the shoulders of those who are. And I am so grateful to God for Tom Horn. I don't know if I'm allowed to, say it, but Joe and doing a marvelous documentary on the life of Tom Horn.
Wow.
And I have to say this, there's no flattery in my statement. No, in my opinion, no man was more intelligent, the best speaker I've ever heard in my life, extemporaneous. He had a photographic memory, and I cherish that. Seriously, John, I cherish that as one of the most exciting things in my life, along with Russ Dizdar. And I just am grateful that you have a passion in this. And so, just anytime you need me, let me know.
I
Okay?
appreciate that. I appreciate that so much, and I'm definitely honored by that statement. I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but for me, this is something that is really amazing to me to be able to talk to you about. I mean, I've respected your work for so long, and obviously Tom Horn as well. I really would have loved the opportunity to be able to speak to him, but for me, this is legendary for me, and I'm thankful, and I'll definitely have you back on. There's something every week going on that who knows what, is going down next week. I mean, my goodness. So I appreciate that a ton. Guys, make sure you guys pound the like button, pound the subscribe button. Go check out Steve's links here. You're not going to regret it. I'm telling you, this is the kind of stuff that I cut my teeth on a long time ago, and you can keep on eating it. It has so much more things on there. So check that out. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.
The world keeps lying, but he won't retreat on his quest for truth. Yeah. Truth, quest for truth. They can't stop me, they can't block me. Moving through, got that fire, they can't block me. Quest for truth, breaking chains, making waves.